Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors. I'm also the founder and head instructor of Connors Martial Arts in Norwood, Massachusetts. We teach Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and mixed martial arts. Reach out to us, give us a call, come down and see us, and we'll just make your life completely better, Dan. What do you think?
Absolutely better, and it's limited time offer.
That's right. It's a limited time offer.
Right.
Get in.
So come in now.
Yeah, while we have open slots.
Right.
We'll make your life 27% better.
Right. And
Right.
after that, maybe not better at all.
Then it'll plateau.
Yeah.
Like everything.
Yeah.
I mean, things just don't keep getting good forever, right?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Now, the last time we spoke, you were doing the Jerry Seinfeld method of exercise and
Yes.
eating maintenance, and you were checking your calendar. And last time you came in, last week, I noticed that you had lost weight. You looked noticeably lighter last week.
And you're saying now?
Now, I think you might have bounced back a little bit. You look good, but you look much leaner. Maybe I've already adjusted.
You've adjusted because I'm the same.
You're the same.
Yeah,
Okay, so I
I'm
just
the same.
adjusted. So what are you weighing in at? 177?
This morning was 179.
70
Maybe it's the 2 pounds.
The 2 pounds. I knew it. I was 176 this morning, and I know all our listeners definitely want to stay abreast
They're
of that.
tracking. So you can
They're
add that to
tracking
your
our weight.
Yeah, you can add that to your charts now. For all the people tracking our weights.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, but I'm staying down. Like I said, we were getting up in the 190s, both of us,
Yeah.
a
that
while
was
ago.
Not pretty.
And
Yeah.
now, so it's worked. That's a life change, right? 15 pounds
It is.
different
Yeah.
and maintaining it. I will say
Definitely.
I know everyone's, of course, been following every word, but the idea was to have a calendar and you just check. If you accomplish something in your life you want to do every day, you make a mark on that calendar. So we call it Jerry Seinfeld because he would write a joke or write comedy every day, and he'd make a X in that day.
Make an X, and then the idea was to have a chain and don't break
Right.
the chain.
Right.
And that
And
gives
so
you
for
momentum.
me, it was eat healthy, and I also put in worked out, and I write my weight at the bottom. And I just have all those things every day staring me in the face. I will say one thing that's been different for me, because we also talk about all these things when you're affecting your life. You don't have to follow it. We're not like taskmasters, right? Like you must do it this way. I think you can make little changes. And so for me, I heard that the big advantage of the Seinfeld method is that people they don't want to break the chain.
Right.
You know, they want to draw a line like X, and they want to keep that going. And so I heard someone say that's worked. Someone commenting on the podcast said that's worked great for me. And I realized that I do it differently. Like I'm not doing it that way.
The
Like
chain doesn't influence you as much as others.
No, what I'm doing is just staring at the calendar like as a whole. So
Mm.
I break the chain all the time, like every weekend. I like one day.
But you look at your month, and
Right.
most of the month is covered.
Right.
with
And
good
I
stuff.
sort of can't bear to have many days in a row with
Mm.
nothing checked off. You know, I'm like, wow, look at this. That's been 4 days.
That starts to annoy you.
Yeah, it annoys me. Or seeing your weight going up pound by pound annoys me. So I don't really care so much about chaining it together. Again, if that works for somebody, that's great. But for me,
I think it might be good in the beginning because if you're doing something like this, you're likely changing your habits.
Right.
So that's going to help you install the new habit.
Right, because I did it. I did chain it together for, I don't know what it was, 2-3 weeks, something like that.
I think it was 3 weeks. So
Right.
I was listening to one of the old episodes, and I think after 1 or 2 weeks, you did not have a lot of obvious progress in losing weight.
Yeah.
But you were eating super healthy and you're exercising. And then I think the 3rd week, bam, it all kicked in and just weight just fell off.
Yeah, that's what happened, doing nothing different.
Yeah.
And then, it's all working out. Like, even if I have a weekend where I'm just like, I'm getting pizza, and it doesn't go all the way back,
Right.
put on a few more pounds, then it's gone by Wednesday or
Yep.
Thursday. So, Hanging in there, doing good.
Awesome.
And you're keeping your weight down too, because
gotta-
you had said that you were doing it, because you had this big tournament coming up.
Right. So we're competing next week, Dan, September 14th down in New York City for the No-Gi Pan Ams. And a bunch of us going down there to do that. Should
And
be a
do
lot of
you
fun.
know who you're competing against?
I don't. I don't know who I'm competing against. But I feel good, Dan, because last year I went down for this and I won. So I am a No-Gi Pan Am Masters gold medal winner.
Right.
Champion, Pan Am champion. So the pressure's off a little bit. So I've altered my goal for this tournament. Do you want to hear about that?
Sure.
So I think I've still been performing, even though I did well at the World Masters Worlds. Nobody scored any points on me, and I lost the ref's decision in the finals. So that's a pretty good performance, right? You could say it's flawless in a way, but I still feel like I was a little tight in my performance. So my goal for this tournament is to not be tight, to be loose and just go out there, let it all hang out, and see what happens.
So that's sort of at the forefront of your mind in your preparation.
Not even in my preparation. Well, I would say in my mental preparation.
Yeah.
That I want to go out there and just have at it, try a bunch of things, see what happens. My son Rory is such a good competitor. I remember, I think he was a white belt, and he was competing a lot and having a lot of success. And then one tournament, he was like, "Yeah, I want to get an Ezekiel choke finish this tournament." And then he went out and he got some Ezekiel chokes finish. And then another one, I think he said he wanted to get an ankle lock. So I think that's a really helpful little trick if you have a goal that's not just winning. And I think it focuses you, and in a way it distracts you from feeling self-conscious and all that entails, how that deteriorates your performance and makes you tighter because you don't want to lose,
Yeah, that's a good idea. I didn't even think of it as a strategy for being less tight. It's sort of chicken and egg, right? Like if you're sort of not uptight in the first place about winning, then it allows you to have these other goals. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're sort of like, my whole ego's not put into whether I win or lose, maybe I'll focus on some other things,
I think now you're suddenly playing your game. You're not playing the game that's laid out there. It's like my game is to get an Ezekiel choke or ankle lock, whatever the heck it is. So there's something about that, Dan, that sort of breaks the spell of the typical pressure people feel. I had somebody ask me the other day, because I was talking about the anxiety and the pressure and the stress response from competing, and they said, "So what are you afraid of? It's only jiu-jitsu. Are you going to get hurt?" And I said, "No, it's very unlikely I'm going to get hurt." That's not where the stress comes from. The stress comes from this feeling of losing esteem from people in your tribe. And I guess we're afraid of falling down the pecking order, falling
Isn't
down
that
the
what
social
everyone's
ladder.
afraid of? I've never really heard of anyone. I'm sure it exists, but anyone that's afraid of, even in MMA, where you can get knocked out.
Right.
I've never heard of anyone that's afraid of that.
I think most of the psychological pressure, 90% of it or more, comes from, we're going to get egg on our face. We're going to embarrass ourselves, and we're going to be lower on the hierarchy, our social hierarchy. And so why are we afraid of that, Dan, is the obvious question. And what's the answer?
Are you actually asking me?
Yeah. Well, it's rhetorically. The answer is our selfish gene feels like we're not going to be able to survive and reproduce because we're going to have fewer friends. We're going to have less access to resources, friends, and potential mating opportunities. And this is all happening unconsciously.
And I think as humans, it's part of the same point, but we have the unique ability to torture ourselves by imagining scenarios. So you can go into a tournament and spend weeks leading up picturing in your head a loss, an embarrassment, maybe people in the gym talking about you behind your back, like, "Oh, did you hear what happened? He really was bad." And and that might, none of that happens, but
Do you ever see the movie Kingpin?
Yeah, of course.
With what's his name? Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
And they go, "Yeah, he pulled a Munson." So he did something so bad that they named like like really screwing up was called a Munson.
Right.
So that's the ultimate, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if people in jiu-jitsu were saying, yeah, he pulled a Connors. He was going into that tournament, and then,
He was
wow,
go-
complete Connors. That's about the worst, right?
Yeah.
Not only do you fall down the social hierarchy, you actually
You
become
become this symbol for
a symbol of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think people do that, and again, it's not
Yeah.
just jujitsu, right? You torture yourself with. You
Yeah.
said that everyone has, a traffic altercation, and you'd spend 20 minutes driving away thinking about what you should have said or what you should have yelled or picturing scenarios in your head.
And that's an after the fact thing where you're
Yeah.
just fantasizing. But like
Yeah.
you said, when the competition is coming in front of you or the challenge is in front of you, you can torture yourself for untold hours, right? Imagining crazy,
All kinds of
horrible
things.
things.
And you can repeat them, right? You can imagine.
Oh, yeah. You run
imagine
through
it,
it.
and then just run through it again.
Let's go through this again, where I'm losing by 20 points and I get choked unconscious and defecate myself.
Right.
Okay, let's do it again.
Right. And we've said before, I don't know if we said it in here or just us talking afterwards, but if you were saying it out loud, you'd realize how crazy your brain is being.
Yeah.
Like if you were sitting there with your friend and saying, man, I can just imagine in 30 seconds getting choked out loud and choked unconscious and crapping myself or something. And then 5 seconds later saying, you know what? I can just imagine 30 seconds in getting choked. Your friend would be like, what are you doing?
Stop
You
that.
just said that. But
Yeah.
when it's yourself and just your brain, you can do it indefinitely. Your brain will play it again and again and again. And like, I never thought of it this way, but it's before the fact and then after the fact, you can torture yourself again, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
not happy with your performance or something didn't go well, you can torture yourself again.
I'm glad you brought this up, Dan, because I have a couple of nuggets of, I guess we'll call them wisdom in regards to this.
Let's go ahead and call it wisdom.
Dimitri, we got to get a bell or something. When Dan or I are going to parcel out some wisdom, we should ring a bell just so our
Yeah.
listeners know. Okay, so
So
picture
then you
this.
can just fast forward through and listen for the nuggets of
Listen
wisdom.
for the bells, yeah. So when I was out in Vegas before the Masters World Championships,
Mm-hmm.
so the night before, I'm in my hotel room about to go to sleep, and I start to think about the competition the next day, right? Doing exactly what you're talking about, creating scenarios, running through them again. And I don't know how I was able to do this, but I said, you know what? I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm going to think about competing tomorrow. I'll have plenty of time before I compete to run through all the scenarios tomorrow. Tonight, I'm just going to go to sleep. And I went to sleep, and I had this 8 or 9 hours of really restful sleep.
That's good. So it worked.
It worked. I assigned a time. I said, I don't compete until 12:30. I'm going to get up at 9:30, get a coffee, and then I'll run through all these dopey scenarios for an hour, and then I'll be done with it. But I'm not going to do it tonight. I'm going to do it tomorrow at 9:30 with my coffee.
That's a great idea. And again, people torture themselves in this way for a lot more than jiu-jitsu, right? It's your business meeting and it's dates and you just allow yourself to be tortured all the time.
Right.
And I think most people don't even consider stopping it. It's in your head. So,
Right. So that's on the front end. And then you
Yeah.
talked about after you have an experience, and now you're torturing yourself about how it could have went differently. So here's what I did in regard to that. So I didn't win the gold medal. I had a flukish kind of experience that happens occasionally where the clock ran out and I was winning by 1 advantage point, which is a tiebreaker point. And after the clock ran out, the referee awarded my opponent 1 advantage point as well for where he was in the match. So now we're tied, and then the ref had a decision to make who should win, and he chose the other player.
Right. So basically, to summarize, the time ran out with you ahead.
On the scoreboard, 0 time left on the scoreboard. I'm winning, and then I lose. It's a tough one to take.
Having not been scored against in any way.
Exactly. So, but it's just the nature
Yeah.
of the sport. It's fine. It's a subjective call. It's not a totally batshit call. Whatever. It's in the realm of possibilities. Fine. Disappointing though. So, I did naturally do what you said. I started running in my head. I'm like, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if I did this? And I think we're evolved to do that, and that's why we.
Well, it can be helpful. Not to interrupt.
It is
but You know
helpful.
what I mean? Because you could fix something you did
It's
wrong.
entirely helpful. That's why we become sad, and that's why we grieve. If we have a romantic situation where we there's a breakup, if we get dumped, if our partner doesn't want to be with us anymore, or if we have somebody we care about die on us, and then we're designed evolutionarily to go into a depression, to sadness, so we can examine what happened and we can see if we should be doing something different. But that's the key point, is like once you figure out the technical distinctions that you should make, then you should try to stop feeling sad anymore and get out and move on then. You know what I mean? So I did exactly that. And the lesson I came up with is I have to probably work on my takedowns a little bit better. I took the guy down, but they said I was out of bounds. So I got to try to design my takedown so I land in bounds. And then at the end, when he was in my guard and I was winning, I can't rest on a one advantage lead. I have to push the pace, either get up to my feet or sweep and make something happen. So those are the two lessons that I learned. There might be other technical lessons. And after that, I just let it go. Boom, forget about it.
Right. Because, so the biological function, right, is to make you learn lessons. But like with a lot of things, or learn what went wrong or examine what went wrong. But with human beings, I was just talking about this over the last weekend, that the, like the biological, as a species, it's too strong now for modern life. So what I mean is,
what's too strong?
A lot of things. So broadly, so you run through it too many times, right?
Absolutely.
And what I was talking about last weekend was, you can be like a middle-aged lady can cut in front of you in line at the grocery store, and you'll get a shot of adrenaline. Mm-hmm. Like your body will be like, you're like, body, I'm not going to have to fight here. Like, what do it's too strong is what I'm saying. Like, or I have to do a speech in front of a bunch of people, and you'll be completely shut down by the adrenaline surge. And you're like, you're being too strong, body. I'm not literally fighting hyenas for my life.
Right.
So it's sort of like some old lady like yells at you, like, you can't park there. And your body's like, are we going to fight for our lives? Like it dumps adrenaline, and you're like, body, it's too strong.
Right.
And so I think they've also seen that, that idea of like, you replay it. It does it too much.
I think so.
And I remember reading this a while ago, that for trauma, so if something bad happens, you're in a bad accident or you've been attacked, or you replay it in your head. And the way, I think you know how the brain works, you're carving it into your memory. Like the more you replay something, you strengthen those connections.
Right. You're what is it? The
neurons.
The synapses are getting stronger.
Yeah, the synapse gets stronger and stronger. So that's why it's the same principle as memorizing a phone number and saying it again and again and again in your head, or trying to remember someone's name.
What is it? The myelin sheathing is wrapping around.
You're strengthening. A bunch of things are happening where you're strengthening those connections. But if you hammer it, so what they were finding is if someone's been, sexually assaulted or was in some sort of trauma, they'll give them some sort of drug to make them stop,
rehashing it. Yeah,
rehashing it. Kind of haze them out as soon as possible to stop digging it into their head, and it's effective in preventing PTSD. You know what I mean? Like if you cannot dig it in.
That seems reasonable.
So at a much lesser level, now you're talking about just like coming out of a tournament or a business meeting or something. It's the same principle, though. Don't dig it in. Something.
I
don't
think so.
dig negative
learn
things
what
in.
technically needs to be learned and move on. If you think about it from our primal history, if a mother and her child were down at a certain point at the river, and a crocodile came along and snatched her child away, she needs to learn a lesson that maybe we can't be at that point in the river. We have to be someplace else, or if we're there, we have to be more vigilant. So the grief and the depression is an opportunity to learn that lesson. But once you learn the lesson, it definitely is better for us if we can just move on. So I found if I deliberately start to try to learn the technical lesson and deliberately try to move beyond those negative feelings, I feel so much better. And you're not losing anything because you're getting the benefit of learning the technical lesson, and you're not wallowing in the sadness or whatever the heck it is.
Right. And to me, these are the details of something you hear all the time, which is live in the present. There's a lot of like be in the moment, present, be in the moment. Some of that I disagree with, but put this way, I agree with it. Right? Like don't dig in for what happened in the past. Don't dig in continually think of what's going to happen in the future. But, we're going into the details now of how to handle it.
Yeah, learn the technical lesson to be learned and move on. In jiu-jitsu, it's exactly the same thing. So if we're enrolling in the academy or even competing and something happens and I get tapped or I get swept, if I beat myself up and feel lousy about myself for that day, or if I go home and run that thing in my head over and over again and I make it about my own value in the hierarchy or whatever, that's not serving me. But if I just figure out the technical lesson, I put my knee up at this point, I can't do that in that situation. Boom, now I can move on.
Yeah.
But that's very hard to do. Like you're saying, most people don't seem to be able to do that effectively.
Right, it's hard. Well, even knowing that, it can creep back in.
I've
had it where I've thought, I've got to stop thinking about this. For me, it's some conflict I had, some conflict that I woke up feeling uncomfortable about, and then I'll replay it and replay it, replay it and replay it. And I've even thought, like, what am I doing? Like, I got to stop replaying it. And then maybe I'm in the shower and I notice I'm replaying it again. I'm like, what?
I think all this stuff happens unconsciously.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It's your selfish gene at work in your nervous system. So you don't even really know that it's happening. It's going to happen when you sort of let your guard down. It'll creep in, like you're saying.
But step one is to think about it. Like, I think most people don't even think about it.
What helps me, Dan, if I understand human nature and I understand this is going to be my tendency, I can adjust for it a little bit. It's not going to be perfect. I can't extinguish that. I'm not going to become enlightened. I'm not going to become a Buddha, but I'm like, oh, right. I'm rehashing this because it must be that we're all insecure about our position in the tribe, and we're terrified that we're going to lose ground in that social hierarchy, that social ladder. So that's why we keep rehashing this stuff. And if we could only be secure in that, like, I don't care where I am in that would take a huge load off of us.
Right. And I think it's subtle because I'm sure there's a bunch of people listening or you or I, if you were asked, are you someone that really cares about your social standing? We'd be like, no, I don't, I don't
You
really.
consciously don't, but we're unconsciously affected by it. Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
That some people, even people listening right now might think, well, I'm not someone that cares about that, but like you sort of do subconsciously.
Yeah, you hear that trite advice. You shouldn't care what anybody thinks. Well, yeah, that's pretty hard to do. And actually, I should care about what certain important people think, that I trust their judgment and I appreciate their friendship. So I do care about what they think. Why would I not want to care about what they think?
Right.
And I'd be a sociopath. I don't want to be a sociopath. Yeah.
Right. And the real strength of it is more the subconscious. Again, I know we've all known so many people that are like, I don't care what anybody thinks. It's like, oh, well, then go give that speech in front of that big crowd. It's like, and see how.
And if they don't, they are a psycho. If they don't really truly care.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, if we were living in a tribe of 50, 60 people, where we stood in that tribe was probably really important. If you're like number 60 on the depth chart, that's probably not good, right?
Yeah, the famine, they're throwing you off a cliff.
Yeah. And you're probably not getting many mating opportunities. So back then it was probably super important. But in today's society, you can be completely screw everything up and you can just move to California or something and start over, right?
Yeah.
You really can't fail in the society in that sense of like losing local esteem, right?
Yeah, and you're not going to starve, and you're not going to starve. And that's why I think how it's become more complicated. It's become more subconscious. I think before, way back when, it was probably pretty obvious. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like, you're afraid of losing esteem. They're like, yeah.
Exactly.
It's sort of obvious. Or, it wasn't subtle. It was like, see, you're grieving because your child was eaten by an alligator. They're like, yeah, I know.
Exactly.
It's like, see, that's helping you realize not to sit by the river. They're like, I know. Like it's sort of more straightforward. Now it's all subtleties. Now it's all, why do you care about getting tapped in a jiu-jitsu tournament? Like it's much harder to see.
And with social media, Dan, I think people are competing for esteem harder than ever before. So you turn around and you're like, well, this person has 1 million followers on Instagram, and I have 200. What the hell am I doing wrong? You can really
have actual measurements now.
Yes, bizarre ones though that have nothing to do with our natural history. They're just cuckoo, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. And I try to do it in jiu-jitsu now too, but it's a daily struggle, Dan. When I go in the gym, I got to say to myself, I'm just here to learn and have some insight into jiu-jitsu, have jiu-jitsu unfold for me a little bit. But it's hard to do that. You still want to like not look bad.
That's another thing for all this advice. You forget. That's sort of why I like the calendar, because it's right there in front of me that you forget, right? Like, you know, you and I can be like, you know what you should do is come in and just think about learning. And then even you who's giving the advice could forget to do it.
Every day I'm struggling. Not only do I forget, even when I remember, it's still a struggle.
Right.
Because we're trying to counter our natural programming. So it's certainly not easy. You know, I had the idea. My son and I went up to Saratoga Springs last weekend, and he competed in a tournament up there, and he did really well. And I tried to compete, but they didn't let me register. I didn't get in on time. But I had a sort of a breakthrough, I think, in our thinking, in that I said, you know what? We should look at all these tournaments as just all a learning opportunity. So it's like we're going to go there and compete as hard as we can, but the outcome isn't important. What's important is what are we learning in the competition. Right. And I think if you could approach it that way, you would improve your performance faster than if you didn't do that. If you're just going there to win, you're more likely to just do your bread and butter and get the hell out of there. And you're probably not. That's probably not a moment of too much development then. Do you follow me?
Yeah. But I think you can also, it's not even and you could have a goal. Like you can say, I really have this strong goal to be world champ. But I'm also going to learn while I'm at it. You know, I'm also.
Well, I think if you put the learning front and center, that's your fastest path to becoming the world champion. That's going to make it obvious. It's like, even if I won at the Masters World Championship by 1 advantage point, 0-0, that's just too tight. If I could improve my performance enough that I tap everybody or win 10 or 12 to nothing, then you really are the world champion. You know what I mean? But the only way to do that is to really immerse yourself in that learning process, because you got to just get that much better than everybody else.
Right.
It's almost the opposite of, we kind of have this American ideal of we're the underdogs and we're unprepared, but we're going to rise to the occasion on that special day. And with our band of misfits, we're going to win. You know, that's kind of like a motif, like Rocky Balboa. It's like not really
since
prepared.
The Revolutionary War, just carried over.
Yeah. But it's better to have an approach of like, I'm going to prepare so well and create this process and system of learning and incremental improvement so much that I'm just going to dominate the competition. You know, you're going to be the New England Patriots instead of you know, some underdog team, some wild card team winning. I think that's a better approach.
Yeah. Yeah, and because also you see, well, with the sports analogy, there's been the crazy, you know, the 86 Mets or the Philly, 90-something Phillies, or like they're just like the band of misfits that comes together and wins it, or the...
Dan, what do you think of, did you read Moneyball or watch the movie?
Both, yeah.
I'm a little unimpressed with the Oakland A's, to tell you the truth. And I think, what's the guy's name that wrote the book? What's his name? Michael Stewart or something? I forget his name.
Yeah, I forgot.
But he's a great writer, right?
Yeah.
So he's one of these guys that can weave a story that's so compelling that you want to listen to it and read it. He's really good. But it's a little bit of a false story, because they really didn't win the world champion. They didn't do it. They didn't win the World Series.
So here's why
they never really did it.
Here's why I'm of two minds on it.
Uh-huh.
I like the idea a lot. Like when I was for a while, I was like a numbers guy in business. You know what I mean? I made models.
Michael Lewis, pardon me.
Yeah. I made models, and I was a statistical modeling guy. And so it was on the other side of it, where like there'd be credit cards handling millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. And the policies would be based on some guy that would be like, so it'd be like, who should we offer this credit card to, and how much money should we offer? There'd be some, guy in his 50s going, yeah.
Just winging it.
Yeah, winging it.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is hundreds of millions of dollars. And then, okay, who should we allow to increase their line? Like if they call up and they want more, you'd be like, like the secret too is that, a big portion of it was income, reported income, but they'd never check income. Like I think that might be to this day, actually. You know, like how are you going to check income?
Mm.
So, but reported income was did reflect something about, you know, it was close
Sure.
enough.
Ability to pay. Yeah.
So, but it would be a guy winging it. So I was the numbers guy, and I'd just be like, well, I'm going to actually analyze like 10 years worth of data and come up with precise recommendations about who should get what and how much. And, you know, and it worked.
I
You know,
bet.
it was working.
So I'm all for
So that's what
using math and
That
statistics
said,
to find insights and find hidden value.
so when Moneyball came, I was like, now finally, like some, you know, 10th grade educated high school coach, you know, guy, 10th grade high school educated baseball coach in the minor leagues is making multi-million dollars decisions about who to hire. That's crazy, you know? So I like the idea. So now the flip side is that these models fail a lot. Like even for the credit card.
Right.
There'd be times
and I think that Oakland wasn't the only franchise using sabermetrics in the models. Everybody was using it. So the advantage dissipates pretty quickly.
And I think there's a little bit to the 10th grade educated coach eyeballing the guy that the models won't pick up. And so I had every day had to go in and be like, why is my model not working? You know, even for the credit card company, I'd be like, why isn't this working? You know, there'd be sort of a panic of like,
was
so
it working better than what was happening previously?
It seemed to, but you know, it would sort of go on a run where it was working better and then something would go wrong. Like models aren't, you know, something because the pre-existing conditions change. You know, they're like the economy's different than the last 10 years. And now your model's
like
systematically failing.
Right. That's like any game theory. If I'm playing poker and I come up with a methodology that seems to be winning, the other players eventually will adapt, and then it's less effective, right? You come up with an investment theory and how to, you know, scrape a little value out of Wall Street, and then the rest of Wall Street figures that out, and that extra value disappears.
Well, that's why you see stock market models, right? Like, are you going to pay for one? You know what I mean? Like, if someone says, I'll sell you this model to predict stocks, like, you can't really trust it, you know, because conditions
even
change.
Even if it did work, it eventually would stop working.
Yeah. And you'd have to, and then there's something too, some guy that's like, well, I don't have any model, but I know business, and I think this is a good or bad company. So with Moneyball and sports, I think it turned out there's something to those coaches that are just sitting there watching and making their evaluation. You know,
but some of it could just be luck, you know. Yeah. I was talking to, I think I was listening to Andy Duke, poker player, on some podcasts. Yeah. Pretty good information. I think I was talking to Derek Chin, who trains with us, and he's an avid poker player. And the level of poker playing, the whole community has matured so much in the last 10 years that everybody's so much more sophisticated and better than they were, that occasionally there'll be a player. There was a guy, I think his name was Gus Hanson, and he was like Danish or something. And he came out and he went on a tear, winning all kinds of poker tournaments and money in poker games. And he wasn't good. He was just different in a particular way that he was throwing off the other players. And he went like on a 2-year run, I think, of winning a lot. And then he just went down the tubes, and that was it. Once people realized, oh, he's just overvaluing everything, he's too aggressive, they just figured out where he was coming from, and he couldn't adjust, and he wasn't effective anymore.
And I think there's huge parallels with Jiu Jitsu for all this, right? My understanding is it's gone on a massive run in the last 10 years.
I think Jiu Jitsu is so much, it's got to be so much better than it used to be. I mean, my son is a blue belt, and he's so good. So his last match, up in Saratoga, he had 4 matches. He won all 4 by different submissions, Dan. So he had, like, got to the guy's back, collar choked him, and then he omoplated somebody, and then he paper cut choked somebody. Then the last guy was pretty good, and he threw a triangle on the guy, like a triangle attempt, and the guy stood all the way up. So Rory sat all the way up. So the guy's standing and Rory's sitting on his shoulders, like higher than him. And the guy's keeping his head up, and I'm yelling, pull the guy's head down so he could finish the triangle. And then instead, Rory slips in an Ezekiel choke on the guy while he's still triangling him. And the guy comes down to his knees and has to tap. And the crowd was really boisterous and yelling, and he completely silenced silenced the crowd. They were just dumbfounded. Like, I think none of them knew what
I
happened.
didn't even know what happened.
Yeah, why did he get tapped? What's going on? So that's pretty sophisticated, and it is. That's how the
Right.
game is getting.
Because I think we get tied up that when you say the game's getting better, people get defensive because either they were around a while ago or they think you're attacking like the
legends.
The legends.
Yeah.
And that's not it at all, I think.
I don't
it's
think
just
so.
it's progressing. It's gotten
Yeah.
it just makes sense. It's gotten so much more popular and so much more in the public eye. So much
Definitely.
more people. First of all, so much more of a pool going in, talent pool. And then secondly, everyone's refining their teaching techniques and what's working and
Yeah.
because those legends, if you go back 20 years, there was one gym, right? For almost anyone, or whole states without a gym.
Yeah.
Tri-state areas with no gyms.
Yeah, those are some big influences. So what you're saying is much larger pool of athletes. There's just a history of technique that people can build upon, number two. And number three, with the internet and communication, I mean, you can watch the best people in the world for hours every day. Like,
Right.
you can't help
That's
but
a huge difference. Though.
yeah. I really feel in the last few years, Dan, my understanding of jiu-jitsu has broadened so much. It's really amazing. And because of the internet and everyone else getting better, I understand so much more about leg locks, different positions, everything than I did before. So, yeah, it's undoubtedly getting more and more sophisticated. I'm sure there's a point where it starts to level off a little bit, but I don't think we're there yet. And then the athletes come in, you start getting the LeBron Jameses of the world doing jiu-jitsu, and what are you going to do about that, I had an interesting story. I was over training with Kru Mark Dellagrotte in Sityodtong in Somerville yesterday, and he told me about years ago he was training at a gym, and one of the Fertitta brothers said, "Hey, Mark, can you train this guy?" And it was Larry Fitzgerald, the Hall of. Is he in the Hall of Fame, or he will be?
Yeah, he's still playing
wide receiver
for the.
He still plays.
Plays for the Cardinals. Yeah.
Wow. And Mark was saying this guy was such an amazing athlete. He just couldn't believe it. And then they were doing a little clinch sparring where they didn't want to hit each other, but basically get in a Muay Thai clinch and try to sweep the guy. And Mark's truly an expert at that. And he said, I couldn't sweep the guy. He had never done anything in his life about this.
Just the athleticism.
The athleticism
too high.
was immeasurable. Yeah. And so you start getting people like that in your sport, and
someone
gonna
like
do
that,
some
and then they
amazing
devote
things.
themselves to the sport from childhood.
right. And we're going to see that in MMA. Somebody asked me when I was out in Vegas about mixed martial arts, and they said, "Do you think it's going to get safer?" And my response was, "No, it's going to get way more dangerous because people are developing more and more ways to hit your skull really hard with some part of their body, right? The flying knees they do now, Dan. I don't know if you've been watching a lot, right? Spinning elbows, punches, kicks. They're just inventing more and more ways to give you a concussion that there's just going to be more and more knockouts, I think, right?
Yeah, and they're not going to, and people like the knockouts, so they're
They're
going to be
knockouts.
slow to
And you can't
curb
really,
that at all.
I don't think you can really make your brain stronger to resist knockouts. It is what it is. So what these guys can do now, they're like video games, the way they can jump and spin, and it's crazy, right?
Yeah, and it's going to keep going.
It's going to keep going. So I've seen things where opponent throws a jab, and he slips the jab and spins around with the right elbow, bong, right on the skull, and knock the guy completely cold. Then we've seen ones where the guy from a standing stop, doesn't even take any steps, leaps in the air, knees the guy, knocks him cold. And we've seen spinning kicks. So we've seen, and they had this other one I saw where the guy does a forward roll like over his shoulder, and as his legs whip around, they come crashing down on somebody's head. Bong, good night. So I wonder what the next thing is going to be to get knocked out that we haven't seen. Oh, then I saw another guy do an elbow where I think he knocked out the Korean Zombie. I forget the guy's name who did it. And it was right at the end of the fight. There was like 10 seconds left, and he ducked forward somehow, and his elbow came up, and his shoulders were loose enough that he cracked him right in the head, and that guy's so hard to knock out and knocked him out.
Yeah.
I never seen anything like it. If you saw that in a movie, you would call BS. That can't work. And these guys are actually doing it. So I wonder what the next thing is that we haven't seen yet to knock somebody out.
Yeah, but all this is to the point that it's really progressing fast.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And it will
stuff.
keep, and the parallel to the poker is it will keep adjusting. Everyone will keep
Right.
adjusting strategy and adjusting technique and move it forward. And
That's
forward
it.
and
That's
forward.
why you want to keep improving your technique, I guess. And I'm still trying to improve my technique in jiu-jitsu. Exciting stuff. I wanted to talk today. We didn't get to it because we're talking about this selfish gene stuff and learning when something goes wrong. We're going to learn from something technically from it and move on. And we're not going to worry about the future so much, or we're going to assign a time to worry about it. So those are the two tips so far.
Is learn or prepare and then move on.
Right.
So
if you're worried about something in the future, assign a time. Give yourself an hour, 45. An hour is plenty of time, and worry the hell about it. Then write it down, and then forget about it, and then you'll limit it to an hour. Otherwise,
that's a good point. Who would sit here and who's listening and is thinking, I want to worry for more than an hour? Like that's not enough. I don't think I can worry my full worry.
That's
in
it.
Only an hour. I mean,
And then when something goes wrong, learn whatever technically is to be learned from it, and try to move on. Maybe sometimes there's nothing to learn from it technically. I suppose that's possible, right?
yeah, but even there, you could come to that conclusion and then move on.
Right. Exactly. So what I wanted to talk about, we've talked about the ego trap here.
Wait, before you even, because I thought about that for jiu-jitsu too. There is this, sometimes something can go wrong in a roll and I'm disappointed and I don't know what happened. But that doesn't change the point where you can reflect, come to the conclusion, I can't figure out what I did wrong, and you still move on, right? So
I think so. But I think if you brainstorm with your training partner, you should be able to figure it out.
Right.
Here's one way
I was picturing like in the car where I'm like, I don't have my training
right.
partner available.
I was thinking about doing this, and I kind of do this sometimes, Dan. I go against somebody, roll with somebody who's really good, and then boom, they sweep me. I go, and I can do it because I own the academy. I go, whoa, stop.
Yeah.
What the heck just happened? Why did that go wrong for me? And then just deconstruct it and break it down and learn from it. So if you did that all the time, you'd probably get really good, right?
Yeah.
And there's no pain of losing status because you're
And if
just
you
a
don't
big
want to, if you
experiment.
don't want to stop the roll, you can just make a mental note, like I want to.
You could do that, but I think as soon as the round ends, you got to jump on it because if every minute you wait before you try to analyze it, it's going to get fuzzier and fuzzier, and it's not going to make sense anymore. But if you did that, then you'd be looking for those things to be happen almost. It would be every time you did get swept or submitted, it would be a good thing because now you're going to learn how that never happens again.
And I've never heard in jiu-jitsu one thing. I don't know if it's unique to jiu-jitsu, but everyone, just about literally everyone I've ever met is perfectly willing to help you understand what they did to you. You know what I mean? Like no one gets like, that's my secret move and I don't want to tell you what I did. I've never met anyone that would do that, right? I think they would
That's
feel
a secret move. That's good, Dan. In our academy, we do not have the culture. We help everybody, and I think that's so important. Back in the old days, it wasn't like that.
Because I could flat ask someone, be like, how are you doing that, sweeping me? How do I stop you? And people be like, I'll show you how to stop me.
I think that's a great question. What am I doing wrong? What should I do differently so that doesn't happen? I think that's a great question. And Dan, nobody asks me that hardly. It's shocking. Yeah. When I sweep somebody or submit them, they just go, oh, well, and they just want to go again, and they don't ask me. And I find it frustrating as a teacher. Or I'll show them what they should be doing differently, and they don't drill it right away. They don't rehearse it. I think if you're making some sort of mistake and you have to do something differently and you get submitted or swept and you get the right information, you should drill it at least 3 times or 4 times because how are you going to remember it properly, you know? I love doing that. I was with Anthony Twining, one of our brown belts, excellent jiu-jitsu, really good, and he's got a tricky bottom half guard game. And I was on top of him in half guard, and he kind of let me start to arm triangle him. This was a few months ago, and he sneakily put in a butterfly hook that I didn't notice, and then when I went to do the arm triangle, he ended up like throwing me on my head somehow. Like I totally compressed my neck. So I hope he feels bad about it. I hope he listens to this and feels bad about it. But it was a great sweep and a great reversal. But yeah, I was like, what's happening? You know, I land on my head, my neck gets compressed on my bottom instead of finishing choking him. And then I just went back and I said, what am I doing wrong? What's going on here? And he just showed me what he does there and how he works it, and it's super effective. And yeah, now I'm better at that position. And it's great, you know. But if you shy away from those experiences, you're just not going to develop at the same pace.
Yeah. And usually in jiu-jitsu, there's like, if you figure out how to prevent that from happening, you're actually just fundamentally positioning yourself better. That would help in a lot. It's sort of not like a one-off, like how do you stop Anthony's sweep? It's like, how do you position yourself in a better way?
Exactly.
Overall.
That's another good point. So this would be maybe our third great point of the podcast, where
we ring the bell.
Ring the bell. Bing, 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 bing. So very often, you know, we're thinking big all the time here in our culture in the U.S. And what did they say? Shoot for the moon, but
shoot for the stars and you'll reach the moon.
I think they say shoot for the moon, you might reach the stars. But
so
but
which
they,
way
but
you're
they,
trying to go? One.
I don't know. I think you're supposed to go super high and then you'll settle for almost high, which is kind of good, I think. But a lot of times, if you just remove small mistakes, you make a lot of progress. And I don't know why we don't like that concept here. People think you're focusing on the negative. Stop talking about the mistakes, but just think about your health. Instead of, oh, I'm going to work out 3 times a day, I'm going to do CrossFit, I'm going to do, you know, an ultra marathon. If you just like, why don't we just not have that donut today? Like if you just incrementally did things, how about less alcohol? You know, how about, and you just removed the unhealthy habits, you would just have to improve. Oh, I'm going to make sure I get the right amount of sleep every night. All those things, you just can't beat it. You know, especially the sleep, I'm more sensitive to now with my Oura ring. I haven't had good sleep the last few nights. Last night was okay. But if you're not eating healthy food and you're not sleeping right, any other kind of health formula or methodology is kind of a waste of time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if, I'm going to take this medication or whatever, it's like, why don't you just start with eating healthy food and getting a good night's sleep and then see where you are? Because that's going to cure so much that, you know, who knows where you'll be from there.
Yeah. Just the basics.
The basics.
Get a little exercise.
Most of us don't. The basics are boring, so we don't want to hear about it. We want the esoteric, exotic.
Yeah, I've been pretty bad too. Because, you know, when I've been out of shape, you always hear like, ease yourself back in. And I could never, you know, I'm always like, if I make it all the way to the gym, I want to work out.
But I think, you know, like, you've been eating healthier,
yeah.
and you've been exercising regularly. So those 2 little things, you're probably the healthiest you've ever been.
You know, in a while anyway.
Yeah. But you're not breaking any records. You know what I mean? You're not running twice as far as you've ever run before. You're not getting a PR in your deadlift. You're not doing any of that extreme stuff, and you've probably made more progress.
I have, and another thing, I don't know if this is, this is dicey because I don't know if it's generally going to work well, but for me, at the first time ever, I don't have a specific goal. I think I might have mentioned it last time. Like I used to always say, I want to reach this weight or this strength, and I like it. I always liked having a goal.
Right.
So you could have the goal, but I think maybe not that focused on it. You know what I mean? Maybe not like I just need to get to this goal. Becomes an overall change of process, which you've mentioned, and you've said for your jiu-jitsu and these tournaments. It's sort of what you were saying earlier in this show.
I want it, Dan, to be all process. Yeah. And I'm thinking I want my whole life to be about process. And
so that's the same thing. If it's all about process, it's not really goal. It's not a goal.
Well, the goal is a direction for the process to head toward. Yeah.
Right.
But the process is everything. You know, we're probably in a computer simulation anyways.
Right.
Right. So there's probably a right way to operate within this video game that we call life, right? So if you figure that out, everything else is going to be easier, right?
And sleep and
I think
eating
sleep.
healthy.
Yeah, and I found when I cut back on alcohol, I wasn't that dehydrated. My hydration was so much better. So, instead of like, oh, I'm going to drink a gallon of water a day, or I'm going to take these supplements, if you just cut back on your alcohol, that's probably going to have a more positive impact than those other solutions.
But it's much harder.
It's harder.
Popping a pill is really easy.
Popping a pill is easy. Yeah, we love the pills,
Yeah.
right? Man, yeah. So maybe we should recap, Dan. I think we got a few minutes left, but I think we've got 3 good points. So one is, don't worry about something in the future. If you need to worry, schedule some time for it. That's not going to interrupt your sleep. And think about the worst case scenario, and that's about it. Think about, prepare right, put an hour in of worrying, and then let it go. And then when things don't go right, put some time in to figure out the technical lesson, not the personal lesson, not the I suck, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough. I was listening to one of our episodes, Dan, and you said that you insult yourself in the car sometimes.
Yeah.
That struck me as really funny. So don't do that.
In the car on the way home from Jiu Jitsu would be the main time I do it.
So don't do that. Find out the technical lesson and probably record it. Probably write it down, the technical lessons to be learned, and try to incorporate them into your process.
And move on. And
move
don't
on.
perseverate on it. Do not repeat it again and again and again to yourself for no reason.
What was that word you used?
Perseverate?
That's a good word.
I think it's a real word.
Sounds great. I'm going to start using it.
Don't perseverate.
Or ruminate.
Right.
And then what was the third thing that we just came up with? We had a third thing.
I know we just rang the bell.
We rang the bell, for God's sakes. We have to rewind the tape.
Maybe it wasn't that good.
You know what? I'll remember it and I'll put it in the notes when I
Right.
put this together.
So
Put it
make
on
sure,
YouTube.
yeah. Read the notes, everybody.
Read the notes. That has everything you want in the notes. And then we have some new super fans.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, Dennis Medina
Right.
shared some stuff, said some wonderful stuff. What a great guy. I just trained with him yesterday.
Thanks, Dennis.
His jiu-jitsu gets better every time I roll with him. So thank you, Dennis. And then you know who else has quickly become a super fan? She wrote a very complimentary and pretty extensive comment on our website about the podcast, which is Marilyn Burke, John Burke's wife.
Nice.
And she loved the podcast. She got a lot out of it, and she's going to keep listening.
Yeah.
And she's very excited. I'm just sad we don't have any more
Thanks,
T-shirts.
Marilyn.
But thank you, Marilyn. Yeah.
Someday we'll have more T-shirts.
We're going to get some T-shirts, and we're going to get some patches when we hit the 100th
Yeah.
mark, right? And that's about it. You got anything to add?
All set.
Okay, so next week I'm down at the Pan Ams, and then we'll see you after the week after that. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please tell your friends about this. Please share it on Facebook. Please rate and review it. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care.